Okay. Hello? Okay, mic is on. Excellent. How is everyone? All right. Fantastic. This has been such an excellent coming together of women and sharing these stories. So mine will be just one of those. And I hope it will resonate. Borrowing from Lillian's word earlier, it will resonate with you. So my story begins with my mother's story. That's my mom, that's my dad. So my mother was born in 1948 to a very poor family. And she was the only one in her family the first and the only one in her family who made it to university, right? And she went to University of Malaya, studied medicine in KL. So that's where she met my dad. Over there, the guy looks like he's the man from Uncle. Yeah. And they met, fell in love. He was here teaching young engineers as part of the Peace Corps. So they fell in love, and after she finished her studies, after she finished her residency, she left and moved to Germany with him, right? And that's where my sister and I were born, right? Now, ta-da, that's us. So in the beginning, she didn't know this, right? But because we were born abroad, we were born in Germany, and because she was married to a non-Malaysian citizen, she was born to a German man, she was married to a German man, and we were born there, we were not entitled to Malaysian citizenship, right? We instead held German passports. And that's because, according to Malaysian law, if a Malaysian woman marries a non-Malaysian man, and she gives birth to their children abroad, then those children are not entitled to Malaysian citizenship. Now, this is in contrast to Malaysian men who, if they can marry whoever they want, and that child can be born wherever in the world, that child is automatically a Malaysian citizen, right? And that didn't matter in the beginning, right? As she was living there, it didn't matter. But the longer she stayed in Germany, the more restless she became, because she wanted to fulfill her potential. She's like, I studied for a medical degree. I went through all this hard work, and I can't give back to my country. I want to go back, I want to fulfill my potential, and I want to give back to my country. My country is developing, they could use my skills. And so she decides to move back to Malaysia with her 2 non-citizen children in tow, right? And my experience growing up was quintessentially Malaysian. My grandparents and my uncle's family lived about 10 minutes away in Kampung Melayu in Johor. And, I went to kindergarten there. I went to Sekolah Agama. I went to Convent Johor Bahru. And dutifully, every Monday, I would recite the Rukun Negara and sing the Negaraku, right? So my friends were here, my life was here, my family was here. Malaysia is essentially the country I know and call home. The only difference between my sister and myself and the children we went to school with was the fact that every couple of months or so, we had to make a trip across the border. We had to do a visa run. And I didn't know this then, and we had to trudge up and down the halls of immigration department, in order to renew our visas as well. Now, I didn't know how stressful this was to my mother. She literally has PTSD from dealing with the immigration department, right? And every time we crossed the border, she was afraid that they wouldn't let us back in, because there were a couple of times we were stopped, held, interrogated before we were allowed back into the country. Like, who are these children? Are they really yours? Why are you bringing them in here? So she had to go through that every single time we left the country and came back in. Now, fast forward, I also didn't know how much additional stuff. The other things I didn't have access to were, of course, even though I went to convent, I didn't have access to scholarships. I was a straight A student, and back then, my dream was to enter Malaysian boarding school, MRSM, because that is where, at least as I knew then, that was where you went if you wanted to make something of yourself. Smart students went to MRSM, and that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to do something more, right? But I didn't have access to that, and so my mom forked out the additional cash to move us into private boarding school at the age of 16. So I didn't know that she had to pay extra for us to access education, to access healthcare, and to access vaccination costs. I mean, for her, it was okay because she was a doctor and she could get those things, but she could navigate that. But at the end of the day, it was much harder, and she had to fork out more for her non-citizen children to access these basic rights. I also didn't know that if I hadn't gotten my citizenship, at the age of 18, we finally got our citizenship. But I didn't know that if that citizenship hadn't come in time before my SPM, I would also not have been allowed to sit for my SPM exam, right? So we made it despite it all, but I was blissfully protected from all the stresses, really, that my mother had to endure. So this was high school, right? Really quickly, fast forward a whole bunch of years. I went to study in the US, did my master's there. And when I came back, and as I was there, as fate would have it, both me and my sister studied abroad. As fate would have it, we met our respective partners during that time. And as I was finishing up my master's, I got pregnant. And I was really worried. I was like, I really want my daughter to be Malaysian. How do I make sure this happens? So I, did what every responsible citizen would do. You call up the Malaysian consulate and say, hey, this is my situation. I'm married to a foreigner. I'm about to give birth because I'm defending my thesis and all. But how do I make sure that I take the right steps, that she has Malaysian citizenship? And they were like, don't worry, Puan, it's all good. All you have to do is register her birth 6 months after she's delivered. Then, no problem. That's too good to be true, of course. So it never really played out like that. She was 4 months old when we came back. And when I went to the National Registration Department, they said, no, you have to actually submit a citizenship application form, and it is subject to approval. It can be approved or denied. And sorry, but I can't tell you how long it'll take. It could take any number of years. And I was like, my God, even with my eyes wide open, I walked right into this mess again, right? And so this is Zulaika, this is my daughter. And she was born in the US and is here, so basically raised here, right? And I submitted my application for her citizenship, and 4 years later, when she was about 4.5 years old, I got called in for an interview with the Immigration Department, with KD and the Home Ministry. And they said, and so here I was, really excited, with my child in tow, went to the interview, and the officer asks, is interviewing me, and then one of the questions she asked me is, hey, are you getting divorced or not, Puan? I was just like, no, but why are you asking? Oh, because it's one of the prerequisites, it might make things a whole lot easier. I was like, what? You need me to get divorced? And she was like, it's a bunch of prerequisites. I'm like, where is this list of prerequisites? I want to know what the requirements are for my daughter to access citizenship. And she was like, we don't make it public. I'm like, well, how would anyone know what the requirements are and what to apply for if you don't make the list public? And why don't you? She was like, no, we can't make it public. Because if we make it public, then you try and fulfill all the requirements. I know, it's a little bit like, what? Well, yes, of course I would try and fulfill the requirements. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste your time or mine. Right, so I was a little bit annoyed. Of course, soon after, I get back, a couple of months later, I get a rejection letter. Not a surprise, I get my rejection letter, and as I pick up the letter, I go to the counter and ask the guy, hey, what do I do now? Now what? It's been rejected. It's like, well, if you're really, really serious, kalau puan betul-betul lah, if you really want her to be a Malaysian citizen, then you should apply again. Is there any difference to the forms that I need to submit? No. You just submit the same forms. I was like, right. And at this point, I had procured 2 supporting letters from 2 ministers, yeah? Still, no dice. So I was really frustrated because I was like, I don't know how to navigate this. And I took to Twitter. And at that point, I took my frustrations on Twitter. And at that point, the Home Minister, I tagged him, was Hishamuddin Hussein. And he was brand new into Twitter land with the Twitter handle H2O. And so he was really responsive. For context, the women's groups had also been really pushing on this issue. They were highlighting that this was an issue of discrimination. And in response, he says, hey, I recognize that there is discrimination against women. This is terrible for women. But don't worry, we don't have to address this through law reform. We don't need to change the law. We can just handle this administratively. From here on out, he says, from here on out, we will expedite all your applications. And yet, my daughter's application got rejected. So I was like, so I took to Twitter and I said all this, and he is really responsive at this point, tags his head of immigration, and head of immigration says, oh, Puan, your daughter should not have gotten rejected. I'm like, I know. But so he said, so then Hishamuddin in response says, oh, well, don't worry about it. Here, meet my special officer. My special officer will guide you through the process. And lo and behold, a few months later, Zuli is a citizen, right? I'm just like, whoa. But I'm also very, very conscious at this point that it is purely a stroke of luck. This has nothing to do with institutional change or reform or making it easier for women. This is purely a lucky break because I got lucky, right? And I'm thinking, and I'm asking her, well, what about all the other women? I'm asking the special officer, what about all the other women who are going through the same situation? What are you going to do for them? Oh, don't worry, we'll sort it out. 10 years later, nothing has happened, nothing's changed. But I get the opportunity, I am lucky enough to get the opportunity to work on this issue, right? All right, so I have a friend, Bina Ramanan, from the women's movement. She's a foreign spouse herself, and she's been running an online platform called Foreign Spouses Support Group. But she says, hey, we've got some funding for a national campaign. We're going to make a video as part of that. Ivy over here was part of that campaign as well. And she says, do you want to be interviewed since you and your sister are both affected? I said, yeah, of course, we'll do it. And we meet many other mothers who are in the same boat as us. And we're just like, okay, and I thought that was the end of it. But then she says, hey, I have an idea. In order to be eligible for more funding, we want to register and make this organization official. Would you help? Would you be a part of that? I was like, of course, I would love to be a part of it. And that's how Family Frontiers was born, right? But that's also the same time, that's around about the same time that COVID hits. And we hear an escalation of stories of things that happen during that time. We hear stories of mothers who are not allowed back into the country, who are detained at the airport, not allowed back into the country because their children are non-citizens. We have children, we have a mother, for example, whose father was on his deathbed. She was in France with her children, and her father was on his deathbed. And she wants to go and see him for the last time. But they won't allow her to come home with her 2 children. And so she has to choose between her dying father and the ongoing care of her children. And because of these travel restrictions, she doesn't know if she'll be let back into France either, right? So she chooses then to stay with her children because of all this uncertainty. We also know of mothers who are at the immigration counters and they are trying to renew their children's visas to stay here, and they say, and the immigration officer at the counter says, oh, I'm sorry, Puan, your child is going to overstay. They'll have to go back to their country of origin. During COVID, this child is 5 years older. And it's just like, these are all impossible situations for women. And the only only reason they are experiencing this is because they are women. They had the misfortune of being women who married foreigners and delivered abroad, right? And so at the end of 2020, we decided enough is enough. We have to draw some attention to this issue. And we decide, Family Frontiers and 6 impacted mothers decide to file a case at the High Court. We say, and the premise of that is, so Family Frontiers, I represent Family Frontiers as the organization, as the NGO, because I'm the president at that point, and we have 6 impacted mothers. Now, we wanted Family Frontiers on that case because we knew that the government typically, in order to resolve cases that are taken to court, the government will then say, oh, well, we'll just offer you citizenship, okay? Don't worry, just shut the case down. And so if there was an NGO on the case, the longevity of that case, the staying power of that case would be assured. So we did. We filed a case in the High Court. The premise was there are 2 conflicting articles in the federal constitution. Article 8.2 says that there should be no discrimination on the basis of gender. And then there are the citizenship provisions that clearly discriminate on the basis of gender. And so we're like, we want the court to essentially harmonize the interpretation of these 2 conflicting articles and make them be, harmonized. And so at the High Court, we are amazed when the outcome in 2021 is a win. We win the case, and for a very short time at least, Malaysian women, all Malaysian women, have the equal right to confer citizenship on their children. It's like, I know, and I wish we had stayed in that moment. But unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, the government decides to file an appeal. They're like, this cannot happen, so we will file an appeal right now. And at the Court of Appeal, unfortunately, we lose the case, right? See my sad, sad face there. It's like, because we lost the case 2-1. The 2 judges who decided against us say, well, we recognize that there is discrimination against women in law, but the courts can't do anything about it. It's Parliament that has to change the law. So, okay, now the case is pending at the federal court. But of course, court cases as they are only culminations of a particular, very specific journey. But the magic happens during the journey. Because part of the advocacy around the case requires us to have mothers share their stories. It is the way to capture the public imagination. It is a way to humanize the issue and make it less about the legal stuff than it is about the lives of the people who are affected, right? And so in the beginning, we have a lot of trouble convincing mothers to share their stories, and they're naturally afraid because they're afraid that if they make their names public, if they make their voices heard, then their applications will be blacklisted and thrown into the deep, dark hole that is the Home Affairs Ministry, right? And never to be seen again. Some of them have already been waiting for 17 years, right? So, but slowly but surely, we have more and more mothers who come out and, these guys, they're just champions, right? They make TikTok accounts for their children. They do videos. They tape every single moment that they record every single moment they go to the JPN counters, to the national registration counters. They record all of it, and they make it public. And it is amazing. Over there, I wish I had a pointer, but over in the top right corner, you have Shamila, who is married to a Kenyan and has 2 Kenyan babies, but she was working for the UN when she was giving birth abroad. We have Patricia over there. We have Aniza, whose 2 oldest children, at the bottom over there, whose 2 oldest children are non-citizens, and her last child is a citizen. And so she's submitted 4 applications, and 4 times she's failed. Now, we have Dr. Yap, who was a frontliner during the pandemic. We have Mashi over here, right, who ironically runs a school in Sabah. She runs 3 schools in Sabah to teach stateless children, right? She's married to a Syrian refugee, and her first 3 children are all born in Malaysia. Then, suddenly, they get word that her husband's family has managed to cross the border from Syria into Turkey, and that could they please come down because he hasn't seen his family in 10 years. So they decide, she's pregnant with her fourth, but they decide, okay, let's do this. And they take all the precautions, they call the embassy, they call the consulate, ask about all of this stuff, and they go. But what happens is that she gives birth prematurely, the child is born there, and because he is a refugee, the child is stateless, right? There is no citizenship from father to inherit, right? And so, child is stateless, they require, after a whole bunch of lobbying, emergency travel documents even to bring the child back into Malaysia. Who I don't have on this, so we have Rachel up there, one child is a Malaysian, the other one is not, and the child's words are, her youngest son is, I want to be Malaysian, so I won't be separated from my mom and my brother, right? And we have so many stories like this. Allison over there gave birth prematurely, couldn't claim citizenship, right? The story that I don't have here is the story, like Aine's picture. Aine has 2 children. She's married to an Indian national. He was working in Saudi. She went to join him. Second child was born over there. Both her children are on the autism spectrum. They're both special needs children. And so when she came back, again, she held out. She refused to give her children Indian citizenship to follow the father for 3 years. For 3 years, her child was stateless while she waited for the Malaysian government to give her child citizenship. And finally, when they couldn't take it any longer, they were like, no, maybe this is better done in Malaysia. She acquiesced, got an Indian passport for that child, and they came back. And still hasn't received Malaysian citizenship, right? But she had to choose. Her struggle is she had to choose which child she could afford to pay for special needs care. The youngest, inevitably, is the one who is nonverbal, right? And therefore needs more care, but she cannot afford it. So she has to choose. Can you imagine being a parent, being a mother who's put in that situation where you have to choose which child you are going to send for special needs care? And again, the only reason they're experiencing this is because they are women, right? Men don't have to go through these problems. They don't have to make these difficult choices, right? But it's magic, and they share their journeys nonetheless, right? And because of the advocacy that goes along with this, because we're making it public, and it's up during elections time, we decide we're going to make this an election issue, right? So the mothers, we mobilize mothers, and what they do is in Johor, in Kelantan, in Sabah, they attend political rallies. They attend all the lectures that political parties are giving. They go up to the candidate and they ask, are you going to support law reform on this issue? Are you going to support Malaysian mothers? And as a result of all this lobbying, every single political party includes in their election manifesto this issue on Malaysian mothers and citizenship rights. We were just ecstatic. And when this government came into power then, February 2023, here we have Anwar holding a poster agreeing with our position. So February 2023, Cabinet announces we are going to change the law. We are going to make sure that Malaysian mothers have equal right to citizenship. We were like, yay, this is excellent, another win, yay. But of course, and again, nothing is as straightforward as it seems, right? Because then we asked them, well, show us what these proposed amendments are. What is going to happen? And so we go for a briefing in June 2023, and we ask them, what's happening? So they say, yeah, here's the presentation. We are going to give mothers equal citizenship. Then they say, we're also introducing a whole other bunch of amendments. And here we are. In that whole bucket of amendments, there are 5 really regressive amendments, right? They take away existing rights that are currently in the federal constitution. So these are rights that we already have, They're proposing to take them away. So they're like, we'll give you the Mother's Amendment, but we're taking away 5 other existing rights. And these rights are to do with the most vulnerable population of children. We have foundlings, so they suggested, abandoned babies, which now currently have access to automatic citizenship. No, now they'll have to apply for citizenship. Mind you, the success rate for citizenship applications, when you apply like that, is a minute 1%. Yeah? They're like, okay, for children of Malaysia, of PRs, permanent residents, those kids now have the right to automatic citizenship. What we're going to do is we're going to make it so that they also have to apply for citizenship, which if that child has nationality from another country, it's okay. But in Malaysia, we have a lot of cases where we have Malaysians who are stateless, right? People who are born here, especially orang asli, orang asal, who are born here, are unable to register their children. And instead of having been given Malaysian citizenship, because of the lack of documents, they are instead given a red IC. They are given permanent residency status. So you will see in that picture over there, in the middle picture, that under negara asal, or country of origin, it will say stateless, or it will say Malaysian, which is ridiculous, right? You have a red IC that says your country of origin is Malaysia. And their children, if their children are born, their children now will no longer be entitled to Malaysian citizenship, automatic Malaysian citizenship. They also want to reduce the age of applications. Previously, you can submit until the age of 21. They're reducing that to the age of 18, which means you have 3 years less to apply for citizenship. We have an overarching, Article 1E in the Constitution is a general overarching protection against statelessness. They're planning to repeal that. It says basically, if you're born here and you have no citizenship to any other country for a whole year, then you are entitled to automatic citizenship. They want to throw that out. And for foreign wives, they essentially want to say, well, the law currently says that you don't get, if you're married within 2 years and get divorced and get citizenship, if you're married, get citizenship, the wife gets citizenship, and then get divorced within 2 years, the government has the right to revoke your citizenship. But they're like, well, we know that nobody can get Malaysian citizenship in 2 years. So what we want to do is extend it. Mind you, this provision was originally there to prevent marriages of convenience, right? But they're like, no, it doesn't work. So what we're going to do is instead, we're going to extend the time. If you have to wait 12 years, well, once you get your citizenship, you cannot get divorced 2 years after you get your citizenship unless your husband dies. Okay? If you do, then we will revoke your citizenship. Also nonsense. So, mothers lobby again. We voice up again. And we have mothers who then say, yes, I want citizenship for my child, but not at the expense of stateless children. This is also a turning stone when we start working together with child rights groups and groups that are working on statelessness. And so our message is decouple the amendments. Move forward with the positive amendment on mothers, draw back all the regressive amendments, right? Nobody asked you to put those regressive amendments in. We don't want them, pull them away. And so we start a whole lobbying process. And as a result of all this pressure and public pressure, the government, before it tables the bill, drops 2 of these regressive amendments. And that's a huge win for civil society and the public in general, right? They drop the one on foundlings, they drop the overall protection. So they say, okay, we're not going to touch that. We're only going to do these 3. Okay, so we're left with 3 regressive amendments. The other thing that they're not telling us at this point, and that we only find out later, is that the bill that's currently being tabled is not retroactive. Meaning, for mothers who have children born abroad, if they're alive right now, if they've been born before the amendment passes, none of that is going to apply to them. All those kids still don't get automatic citizenship, right? So it doesn't solve our problem. But still, we push for it. And we raised this issue over and over and over again, including with the child rights groups and with the statelessness groups. Okay, hang on. And so I'm at the end of it. Where are we at right now? We know that the bill is going to be tabled next week, in fact, between the 14th and the 16th of October. We believe that it might get passed as is, with some of those regressive amendments still in place. But we're still lobbying, and we're still raising this issue. Second is we still have the case that's going to be heard at the federal court. Remember that? Yeah. That's going to be heard on the 10th of December, which is International Human Rights Day, which I think is a good omen. So that's going to happen on the 10th of December. And so while this journey has started out as a journey of one, it's actually the journey of thousands, right? Now, individually, we're all drops in the ocean of bureaucracy, in this ocean of bureaucracy. But together, I think what it's really done is shown me that together we are the sea change that can transform the landscape of Malaysia, that we can bring about change where we thought change was impossible, that we can transform this landscape into a landscape of hope and of resilience, and one where our children's dreams are able to come true. Thank you.